Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Radio Culturale show. Today, we are talking about stereotypes, and stereotypes can take many different forms, but we are focusing on stereotypes based on race or culture or country of origin. Today, we're here with four of our ambassadors from our office, and I'll just get them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Esther and I'm a second year biological science student and I grew up in Singapore.
Hi, I'm Pallak. I'm a second year international development student and I am from India.
I go.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm in my third year in biomed. I'm Chinese, but I grew up in Toronto.
Hey, I'm Mitch Downton. I'm a third year zoology student, and I grew up in the GTA.
Hi everyone, my name is Hong Lam. I'm not born in Canada, but I pretty much grew up here, so I consider myself Canadian, but I'm Vietnamese as well.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the show today. And we will start off with a very, strong question. Have any of you experienced being stereotyped, like personally, or have you witnessed it? And what was your reaction?
I don't remember any specific incidents of me being stereotyped, but I'm sure I've been. I have a friend of mine who's getting married in April, and she's a roommate, and when other friends came to know that it was an arranged marriage, everybody was kind of surprised, and they started asking me questions. Oh, so has she seen the boy, or did she have a say in it? Which is very, which is a very common notion that girls in India, guys and girls in India get into, or they form an arranged marriage, and sometimes they don't know each other, sometimes they don't even get to see, but that's a bit of an old tradition. My friend had known the guy since 6 to 8 months. They've talked, they know each other, they like each other, and that's how they're getting married. And my reaction to it was, well, I just explained. I did understand that sometimes we can generalize, and I explained to her, and it was fine.
Okay. Anyone else?
Okay, during the winter break I went to my grandaunt's place in Montreal and I think the older generation tend to be a bit more, they hold on to stereotypes more. So my grandaunt was going on about, no offense, but Indians. So
Okay.
she was going on, they're like, oh, those Indians, they are so messy and they're like sloppy with their work, which is not true because I met so many Indians and they're not sloppy. And it's just, I think they generally tend to think maybe back then they were.
Just take your time because that's the thing. Some stereotypes, and it does happen. So it's good that we can come and discuss it on the radio. There are stereotypes out there. We know it all happens. But again, it's people being misinformed, and we hope that on our show, that people will become a little bit more informed that stereotypes can hurt, but. Again, in our discussion, maybe sometimes stereotypes could be a positive thing, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So thanks for sharing, Esther. Okay, so again, going back to that, do you think that all stereotypes are negative?
I think there can definitely be some positive stereotypes, but the thing with the positive ones is it probably have negative consequences associated with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking before about example, like all Asians, I guess, are supposed to be smart, but then, like she said, that puts a lot of pressure on them to do well in school. So that's definitely a downside to that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it could depend on the situation you're in. Like, say, you're in a job interview and it could play in your favor, a stereotype, but then in other situations, it could be not as well received.
Mm-hmm.
Or you would find it hurtful.
Mm-hmm. For me personally, yes, I do agree that a lot of stereotypes can be negative, and I guess that's the reason why it's a stereotype, because you are saying that a group of people fit into the specific mold, when people are individuals and grow up, yes, maybe within a similar culture, but they can be different from the general norm. So, example, people from certain places, maybe from the developing countries, being always late. Well, I kind of fit into that stereotype. but I know people who are very much, are on time, or people who will be there even before time, from my specific country. So I think it can be, again, it could be negative, but it can also be a positive thing. So, yeah, and also, again, from my culture, a positive stereotype is that we are all happy-go-lucky people because it's always warm and we have beaches. And, so the people from our area, always happy, and it's true. But then, the negative aspect of that, as Mitch was saying, there's always a downside where people just think that we are not productive. We're just always very laid back, and so we don't get a lot accomplished, and that is definitely not true. So even if it's positive, it can be interpreted as negative.
I just wanted to say that it's similar. It's easy for perhaps a person from a different culture to generalize the other population because you've never been there. But if you look at your own culture, you would agree, or most of the people would agree, that people are not similar. And if you ask them, and they would probably say that, oh, he grew up in a different family, or they grew up in a different, circumstances. So it's the same way. When we look at ourselves, if we don't generalize, we should look at the others at the similar way.
Mm-hmm.
Just because perhaps, as you said, a country is developing does not mean that every family in that country brings or treats their children the same way, or teaches their kids the similar way.
Right. Agreed. Well, we know where we get a lot of our stereotypes would be within media. So it's going to be in magazines, in the newspapers, and on TV, on the internet, many different ways that stereotypes are perpetuated, even within comedy. So we were having a little conversation before we started the show, and a very popular Canadian comedian, Russell Peters, always does comedy based on stereotypes, even within his own culture as well. So what do you think about stereotypes in media in general?
Well, I think there can definitely be some negative stereotypes associated in media. One example is sports teams. Like, you have the Washington Redskins, the Atlanta Braves. Like, these teams, it's pretty negative. Like, they were made in the early 1900s and stuff. But coming back now, I don't think it's really politically correct to use some of those terms. So I think that definitely can have an effect on some people. I don't think the Native Americans like those names.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Do you think it's the media that's allowing this, like you said, perpetuation of stereotypes? Because I find it interesting that across so many totally different cultures, we have the same stereotypes of certain groups of people. We're all united in the same beliefs about all the different cultures, which is funny.
Yeah. So I think, and especially with the internet boom, right, that we, again, and I think even before that, within TV and on the radio, I think a lot of these stereotypes were started and just continued throughout time, and it's not something that we can seem to shake off. I mean, so many things have changed since. Again, Mitch's point about, these teams were formed in the maybe early 1900s, let's say. I'm not really sure about when football started and everything, but it's true that, there may have been a time when a lot of people were similar, acted very similarly. But with changing times, I think so many things have changed. And so holding on to those old stereotypes is sometimes not a good thing. But those are the ones that get perpetuated, and they never seem to change.
Talking about stereotyping your own culture, I personally don't think I agree with it. And sometimes it's funny to hear Russell Peters, but at times it is offending.
You very
This-
much so.
Yeah, it's. I don't think a person has a right to make fun of their own culture just because they belong to that culture. Similarly, as we don't have a right to make anyone fun of anyone else's culture. So obviously, media uses it for generalization because commercials. I mean, they can't really have an hour-long commercial, so sometimes they have to generalize and showcase it in a simple way that most or majority of the population can connect with or understand easily. That perhaps serves some purpose, but this does not necessarily mean that it's the right way to go about it.
Yeah. Like I remember, and again too, right? Like you talked about within a culture that's, it's bad. Again, of course, the stereotypes are mostly negative or can be interpreted as negative. So it's hard when someone, who you think should be trying to fight that stereotype, propagating it, it's one thing, but also again, like, hitting on, you only again have an interpretation of a stereotype based on media or based on old stories and things like that, and you again don't know what it's like to be in that country or be from that culture, and talking about people's culture and making fun of it, I think, is so terrible. So I remembered a friend of mine was showing me this YouTube clip about Russell Peters talking about Trinidadians, and she was just laughing, ha ha ha, she thought it was so funny. And then when it went on to talk about Asians, she got a little bit offended. And I said, well, that's exactly how I felt when he was talking about, and so I think sometimes, it really hurts when we hear something bad about our own and we can laugh at others, but when it really hits us at home, that's when we feel offended and we think, oh, that, that person did the wrong thing. But why do we laugh at someone else's, stereotype?
I'm sorry for bashing Russell Peters too much, but I actually...
Oops, hopefully he's not listening.
I hope so. I remember that I was visiting a friend, and her brother, somehow, I don't know why, their school library had a video, or what is it called, a DVD of Russell Peters, and he started watching it, and since I was there visiting them, one day he just came up to me and started to put on this fake Indian accent and talk about a very stereotypical family scenario. And I was really shocked. And I asked him, where did he learn this? And he was like, oh, Russell Peters. So even though he's a kid, so what he's looking at, he can't think that, Russell Peters is just making fun. That's his way of earning money. He thinks that's true. And I feel like that was very strong. That was a very strong message that I felt that, okay, this is not right. He needs to understand. And I am his family friend or whatever, so I wasn't too much offended. But if he goes up to a school student or fellow student and says such things, that's not gonna end well. So I feel like it's not that Russell Peters his videos are being seen by kids, by people who don't really think critically about what they're watching. So this is propagating or perpetuating the stereotypes even more.
Right. But why can't we lighten up? Like, other people find it funny. Why are we all sitting here saying, well, it's not the best thing to do? Why?
Well, I think it's definitely, there's some negative aspects to it as well. But I know there's some Caucasian comedians I've seen. They make fun of, I guess, white people. And to me, I find it's kind of funny because, like, I don't know, white people have been pretty mean in the past. So to make fun of yourself, is kind of lighthearted, I think. But that's just... from my culture aspect of it. So
I think it really depends. If you're with a group of friends and you know that all of them don't mean it and it's just for fun, it's for fun. But when one starts to believe it and then act in a certain way that is according to that stereotype, I feel that's when the problem occurs.
No, definitely, I agree. I think that's why those comedians are targeting adults too. I don't think they should be viewed by kids.
Yeah.
Well, so.
But as Pallak was saying, like, I think critically thinking individuals, because sometimes hearing about a certain stereotype and not being able to expand your horizon by traveling to another place or meeting people from that place, then you're always going to have it in your mind. So as Esther was telling her story at the beginning, that's what that's the impression that you have. And when you sometimes see people acting in that way, so you have already this stereotype in your mind about this specific group, and you see maybe one person or two people, fulfill that stereotype, then you assume that of everyone. So your interaction with everyone now has changed. Whereas, again, we talked about people being different. You haven't had a chance to really expose yourself to that culture, that group of people. So you end up with that in your mind. And if you don't think critically and think, okay, people are different, people have their own personalities, maybe it's a generalization, but it's not necessarily that everybody from that place behaves like that, or maybe in this day not everyone behaves like that. You're still going to be holding on to that, and that's where the problem really lies. And I think talking about like maybe Caucasians being mean in the past in terms of slavery and the Holocaust and things like that, I mean, again, some of those stereotypes are passed on or not necessarily stereotypes, but that's how racism, I guess, gets propagated from generation to generation, because people cannot let go of certain things, and that's why we still see racism today. But at the same time, if we think about maybe what happened in the past, it happened in the past and we have to learn about it. And I know that some people say that you don't need to know about your past to for your future to be guided, but I really do think that you should know what happened in the past and learn from it, not to dwell on it. So I personally, as a person of from an African background, I don't look at all white people and say, oh, they're very mean. They held my family hostage, and this is why I have a Scottish last name now, and things like that. I don't hold that. It happened, and people have changed since then, and that's what I've embraced. So the stereotypes of even watching the movie Django Unchained, really at the beginning I was like, oh my gosh, like my ancestors went through some of these things. But again, like, why slavery was abolished was because there were white people from mostly in the North who helped us get out of that. So, I mean, again, there are certain stereotypes, but people are all different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some stereotypes might have lasted so long because they might be rooted in a fraction of the truth, and that's why they last so long. But then people extrapolate that fraction, and that takes over their whole persona of how they see the people. So, and then that's where you get the racism and stuff. So
definitely, agree. Yeah, but as you said, so racism is kind of rooted in, I guess, I like that, in a fraction of the truth. Do you think then that it will help us to just get an idea of how to approach people, or how we should interact with them, or even visiting a certain country? Would you think that stereotype might help? So I'll give you an example. So going back to being late all the time. If you do go to some countries where people are known for being notoriously late, if you go to meet someone and they show up late, does that help you like understand, okay, they're not purposely doing this to be mean, but they're just generally late? So does it help?
Yeah, I think so. Indians are actually known for being late. I'm sorry, but I'm kind of stereotyping my own culture here. But I'm a Punjabi, and it's a common saying that their marriages, if they're scheduled for the day, they start in the evening, kind of thing. But I feel, yes, that was a very good point. Just knowing or being aware that such things, you might be facing such things, especially when visiting a country for the first time, it might help you understand. If perhaps I didn't know that people here are usually or tend to be late, I would just be thinking that, oh, that was so mean. Maybe they don't want to meet me. They don't like me, or something like that. But since I'm aware that people can be late here, I think that would help me understand that, okay, well, that wasn't done for a bad purpose. That was just a part of their culture.
Right. And it's the same thing with North Americans. It's something that I really struggled with, like, you told your friend, okay, you're going to do this, but at home, if we say we're going to do something and then you change your mind, it's like, all right, no problem, another time. But here, people are really to the book, and it's like, oh well, I changed all my plans, and we're supposed to do this. So it made me it made me more aware that okay, I should really try to stick to schedules, and I cannot be disappointing people. Like, they may not be able to understand where I came from, after trying to first of all trying to understand why people got so upset about these things, and then kind of understanding it, then I can change the way that I interact with this culture now, and say, well, okay, I need to be a little bit more I guess organized and keep to my word.
I just called off 2 appointments today.
Good luck.
I hope it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you're visiting a new country, you definitely should keep those stereotypes, I guess, in mind. But also keep an open mind. Don't just base your whole like thought process on that. People are gonna be different wherever you go. So.
Yeah, because another, and just sticking with, is something very light, like the whole being late or being on time thing. So again, someone goes to our country and they sitting there expecting, okay, this person's gonna be late. So either they show up late, or they just sit there waiting, like thinking that they're going to be waiting for a long time, but then the person shows up on time, and they will, they might have said something like, oh, I thought you're going to be late, like like, I mean, that's not not necessarily a good thing to say to someone who probably prides themselves in being punctual. So that it's maybe one of the lighter things, but then there's some of the other really, really hurtful things that we go in to a specific country or approaching a specific culture, and we're just expecting them to be that way. So again, keeping an open mind, I think, is a major factor. And again, not taking away those stereotypes that may be sometimes, again, interacting with a small number of people from a specific culture can reinforce that stereotype that you have. So again, challenging yourself to say, okay, maybe I've met 5 people, maybe they're like this, but I do believe I can meet people who are different. Yeah. And we talked a lot about this in some of our workshops that we did in terms of like cross-cultural communication. And because we are in an academic setting, we think a lot about group work. So imagine a group of students coming together and working on a project, and they're coming from various cultures, and you already thought, okay, this person's going to be this way, this person's going to try to take over the group, this person's going to be late, this person's not going to contribute because they're lazy, and you do happen to meet people from those cultures, either that they fulfill those stereotypes, so you walk away with it being like, oh, I knew that person's going to be like that, or maybe people that challenge your thought about what you did believe. So I think it's a pretty interesting topic, an interesting concept of stereotypes, but I would more think of the word as more as generalized rather than stereotype. I think stereotype is a harsh word and maybe more associated with negative connotations. I
feel like generalizing, we do generalize. I mean, that's the way our minds work.
Yes.
Even talking about not even any culture, talking about anything. We do generalize about school. We generalize about teachers. So that's kind of making our life easier, I guess.
Exactly.
But as you said, we need to have an open mind and not hurt someone with those generalizations.
Yeah. Okay. So any final words on with respect to stereotypes? And
I thought of a funny story, but it doesn't really fit in here. Just a random
Please do
tidbit.
share.
My Korean friend and I went to visit our roommate during the summer. She lives in a really small town, a rural town in Ontario. So we get there, and there's not really an Asian population there at all. So some of the citizens there were like, oh, they must be exchange students. So they approached us and were like, hi, ni hao, whatever. Like, what are your names? So we'd be like, Michelle, my name's Michelle. That's not your real name, is it? And like, this went on for a bit because they kept thinking I was lying, and that wasn't my real name, because I would obviously have an Asian name and not an
Yeah.
English name.
Yeah.
So that was funny.
And they probably thought you weren't even born in Canada,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they thought
Yeah.
we were exchange on
Right.
exchange.
Yeah, that's a good story. Hmm. I had a project when I was in university with a drama. It's a drama group, and we were paired up with. We were paired with other classmates, and we had to speak with them for 5 minutes. So we got to exchange stories for 5 minutes, and I got paired up with a South African student, and so her biggest stories were actually when I did the presentation on her, I did presentations on our similarities and our differences, and the stories that she got was like, do you have a pet lion? Because she was from South Africa, so people just assumed that she lived right. She can open her door and see lions and things like that. And for me, I mean, and it's in this day and age that I'd get questions still like, do we live in huts and things like that. So those are some of the funny.
Or even living in
stories.
Canada, like Americans always think like we live in igloos and stuff. When
True.
really, Toronto is like right next to Buffalo. So yeah.
It's true. But I do think about like the Arctic and things like that, and I think they must live in igloos. But this is so funny.
No, I can't.
Yeah, or like Greenland and those kind of places. Yeah, but so sometimes you have those generalizations or those stereotypes, and sometimes funny, but sometimes quite hurtful. So
One thing that I thought was it was kind of an interesting experience, but in terms of anecdotes, but you know how we do the whole like introduce yourselves to classmates and stuff like that in the beginning of the semester and stuff. So for one time, I think I was talking to one of our students in class, and you can just tell that there was a curiosity in her that was like, so what's who are you, like what's your background and everything. But she didn't want to say it because she wanted to be very politically correct, so she was trying to like find a way to say that without being offensive. And I was just like, yeah, so I just decided to just bring it up, just like, yeah, I'm from Vietnam. And she was like, oh, so is that your background? Is it like, are you like born in Canada and everything, or are you just born somewhere else? And she was really, really curious, but like she didn't want to bring it up because she was being very politically correct. And I thought that was really, really cute in the way that she was just like, she was trying to be very polite and everything, and be nice about it. And I think that our culture right now is starting to develop a little bit more into to be a bit more sensitive in that kind of area. And I think that's a really good way to start going into that area where we're like we don't have to like start stereotyping into like cultures. We don't start asking the question like when you meet each other, hi, how are you? What country are you from? But it's just more like when we come in, you talk normally and stuff like that. And if you happen to be curious about, if you are curious, then personally, I think that it's fine that if you want to ask me about like where I'm from and everything, it's a really interesting way to start a conversation. But like, I think that it's kind of comical sometimes, and how like some people can be very oversensitive about culture. Like you hear in the news how everyone's like so politically correct that it just sounds kind of ridiculous. Where it's just like African American born with whatever yada yada yada, like a huge line of like trying to not categorize yourself in a certain way to avoid stereotypes and stuff like that. And that's a really good way to start, but sometimes it can get kind of ridiculous and just like get a step back. Like there's some points where like if you go overboard with political correctness, it gets into the same point.
Almost, if you go overboard, it's almost having the opposite effect.
Yeah.
Because it's so blatantly obvious, I guess the person can tell, okay, I get what you're doing.
Yeah. I've had
Exactly.
that done to me too. People come up to me and they don't want to ask where I'm from, but the moment I tell I'm from India, I thought so, but I didn't want to ask you. And I'm like, oh, you could have just asked me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens sometimes too, and it's really, really, I find it really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, again, it's a very strong, a very sensitive topic, and I really thank you all for sharing. You're like like personal stories and some of the thoughts that you have on stereotypes. And I guess again the takeaway message is more of generalization and keeping an open mind when interacting with different cultures that you may not know about, or about cultures that you've seen in the media, like a stereotype in the media, and challenging those stereotypes when you meet various individuals or people from that culture. So again, thank you very much for being a part of the show. And we do hope that you enjoyed our show today, and do tune in next week.